Recording in progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to proceed with roll call. Mayor Lindsay,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
here.
Councillor Humbert,
Here.
Councillor Crane,
Here.
and Councillor Weeks.
Here.
We have a quorum. You may proceed.
Okay, at this time, I would ask Mayor Pro Tem Howe to make a motion to approve the agenda, but I would ask that we move the manager's report from the bottom of the agenda to follow the approval of the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda with moving the manager's report immediately after approval of consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, I'd ask Mayor Pro Tem Howe for a motion for the approval of the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Manager Weir?
Mayor, council, audience. Today we have a guest, Mr. Eric Harrigan, who represents us and assists us in managing our Go Bond accounts. And it is that time of year again when we consider going out and selling additional bonds. And what I wanted to do was to present to the council today some options that are out there on what we can do to bring in money and to understand those options. This is just a presentation. There'll be no decisions made today, but we will, to fit the timeline that we need, we will have to ask you to make a decision at the next council meeting on the 28th. We did have some updates to the presentation. He's going to show the presentation. Ileana, I don't know if you can expand that to show his entire presentation. No?
That's on his screen. I can't.
Don't want to do it?
No.
I did send to everybody the email. Unfortunately, we didn't get the presentation because some information in, we didn't get it until yesterday. But I did email it. I hope you guys had a chance to look at it. But again, no decisions today. We have 2 weeks. You guys come back with all the questions you want. You need a meeting to sit down and go over it. We're happy to do that. But on the 28th, we will ask you for a decision on how to proceed with our potential bond activity for the coming year. And with that, I would like to turn the mic over to Eric.
Well, very good. Mayor's members of council, this is Eric with RBC Capital Markets. Happy to be visiting with you this evening. As the manager said, what we've done is that we've prepared kind of a couple of scenarios, extra capacity to provide capital projects throughout the village. And so I'll just kind of go through it. The presentation is fairly detailed. We've provided some additional information about the village's debt in the back part of the presentation, which I wasn't going to really cover in a lot of detail, but I'm certainly happy to go through it and answer questions. So what we wanted to talk about first is the GO bonds. So voters did authorize 1.8 million of general obligation bonds. And at the time that the village was looking to go out for additional authorization, it was important to kind of maintain the existing tax rate that the village had for debt service. So before we kind of get into that, we want to talk a little bit about your tax base, because your tax base is a critical component of your general obligation bonds. It not only goes to the sort of legal capacity that you have to issue, but the faster your tax base grows, the faster you're able to retire debt, the slower your tax base grows. Conversely, the slower you're able to retire your debt. So, over the past couple of years, the village has seen very strong growth in its tax base, almost 6% in 2023, and in tax year 2024, saw nearly 7% growth in your tax base. This has been attributable to strong growth in residential values, which is what we have, been seeing pretty much across, across the state in most communities. We've seen strong growth, in residential values. When we look at what your, bonding capacity is that it's capped at 4% of your assessed value. So your 2024 assessed value, 320 million, 4% of that is 12 million. You do have outstanding general obligation bonds that the village has issued, and that gives you a remaining capacity of about 6.9 million. So right now the village is 46% bonded to capacity, and so what we looked at is that if you were to try to increase your capacity and try to get up towards, near capacity, or maybe closer to 75% capacity, what would that look like in terms of the amount of debt that the village could issue, as well as what is the tax rate necessary to support that? The other thing we wanted to just point out is the various tax rates. The village is not the only entity that levies a tax rate on properties. You've got the state of New Mexico, you have the county, the school district, and then there's the hospital, that they all levy taxes on property for various purposes through either operations or debt service. The village has an operational mill levy of $5.50, and then you have a debt service mill levy of $4.20, and that has stayed level for several years now. Overall, because all of the local governments haven't really changed their property tax rates, the residential property tax rate has remained very stable. So taking a look at all of the various GO bonds that the village has outstanding, there's a total of 6. The last one that's currently outstanding is that you can see how this debt is scheduled to pay off. So it's relatively level over the next couple of years, and then starts to decline fairly rapidly. And that was designed so that the village could go back to voters at some point in the future, ask for additional authorization without a tax impact. We'll kind of talk about what that capacity looks like in the next coming slides. So just to kind of sort of turn this into a graphical depiction, what can the village do to continue to maintain its $4.20 tax rate? And this would keep the village basically at around 50% bonded to capacity, because of the way your debt's structured, including this would be including the bonds that voters last authorized in November of 2023. The village could go out for about $5.5 million for additional authorization and continue to maintain that tax rate. And then that would give the village an additional authorization of $5.5 million in 2031. Again, this would just be to continue to maintain, the existing rate that the village has, as well as allow the village to issue the 1.8 million that was authorized by voters in 2023. If we looked at taking, the village's tax, bonded to capacity up to 75%, this would give the village the opportunity to go back to voters early if it so chose, to ask for authorization. We would anticipate that capacity would be about 6,750,000, and the village could go back to voters as early as this November in 2025 to ask for additional authorization. It would result in a tax rate increase. That tax rate increase would be roughly $2, and that's expressed in $1,000 per net taxable value. And so what we've done is that we've provided various home values, anywhere between 400,000 to 200,000. If we were to take the village up to essentially 100% bonded to capacity, that would allow voters to go back to voters in early as 2025 in the amount of 9.5 million. And those would be sold over a 4-year period, and again another 9.5 million in 2029. That would result in a tax increase of about $3.80. And again, we've provided various home values and the property tax that those various home values would pay. So for example, a $600,000 home would pay around $760 in additional property taxes, if the village wanted to go to 100% bonded capacity. One of the questions that you might have is that, while we show that your, additional capacity currently is only, 6 million, the reason that you're able to go out to voters for 9.5 million is because you're going to be issuing bonds. And then as you pay those bonds down, you're able to issue additional bonds. And so over that 4-year period between 2025 and 2029, that you would issue those bonds, you never go above 100% bonded to capacity. So while you're asking voters for more capacity than you currently have right now, because you're paying debt off, you're issuing and paying debt off, that's what allows for you to have a little bit more capacity over that 4-year period. So with that, I might pause before I kind of talk, and sort of talk about the bonds that voters authorized most recently. And we've put together a time schedule should the village want to pursue issuing those bonds this year. But before I go into that, I thought I would just kind of pause, maybe take some questions, and provide any feedback that the village council has.
What can we use these for?
I'm sorry?
What's the different ranges of projects we can use these for if we increase?
So, Eric, I don't know if you want to speak to what is open as far as Go Bond and what projects the money can be spent on. Typically, it's infrastructure projects, roads, water, sewer, those types of projects, but that's what we've used it for historically, but there's actually a lot more things that it could be used for. And when you go out to, for election, you would need to define the parameters of use in the bond that the voters would be voting for. And then, of course, the use of that money would be restricted to those parameters. And those can change with each bond election. So for example, we had one bond election, I want to say it was 21. Eric, when was the last bond election? The one that we did where it all had to be spent on water, wastewater. Because historically we split 50% of the bond for streets, 50% for water, wastewater. But then we had one bond, it's either 17 or 18 or somewhere in there, where it was 100% dedicated to joint utilities, water and wastewater, no roads.
The 2022 Go Bond is specifically for water, wastewater.
2022, I couldn't remember which one.
Yep.
And they can also, well, you said there are many uses, but they can also be used for our funds for grant matches, correct?
For federal grant, for grant matches, yeah, it can be state or federal grant matches. But again, I think that needs to be specified in the election and the parameters of the bond election. And maybe you can speak to that a little more, Eric.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is correct. Excuse me, just one moment. Yeah, that is correct. So when you go to voters, you have to ask for what the money is going to be spent on. And there's a prohibition against what is called log rolling, meaning that you're rolling multiple types of projects. They have to be, they have to be related, for example, if you ask voters for, geo bond authorization related to roads, things like drainage and sidewalks and right of ways and easements, that's all part of that road project. So it could be spent on those funds, but you couldn't ask for, roads and then, build a community center, for example. So geo bond, state statute is pretty broad. Generally it's available for, general governmental purposes. You can use it for water, wastewater, which the village has done, roads. You can use it for public buildings. You can use it, for matching federal funds, just so long as the project that you're matching, is consistent with what voters authorized. Generally speaking, when you go to voters, you're going to want to have, a project that has, fairly broad, support from the community, in terms of how they want to see, the tax dollars, spent. But there are a number of different things that you can, issue general obligation bonds for. I know there are communities that issue general obligation bonds for open space purchases, as well. They typically have to be a long-term, asset in nature, because the project that you're constructing needs to match the useful life and the average life of the debt that you're issuing to fund that project with.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager, do you have any idea how much more we need for water, wastewater?
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, that's a great question. To really redo what is of age and needs to be replaced, it is an astronomical number, but I'm gonna take just a small portion of what needs to be done. That is a priority at the village level, and that is the 47 miles of undersized water lines we have in the village. So we do have water lines that do not meet today's standards because they were put in the 60s and 70s. And again, it is 47 miles worth of those water lines. And the importance of those, the undersized water lines, first of all, they're the older water lines, and they're where the majority of our leaks occur that we have are in those older water lines. But the bigger problem is, even though the water pressure is sufficient for housing, the question comes up in fire prevention. Because in a lot of those places with undersized water lines, you can get water out of your fire hydrant, and that water may be sufficient to fight maybe a small structure fire or something. But if we had another Calf Canyon here, the volume of water that we would need to fight that fire within the village limits would be, those lines could not handle that capacity. So that is a big concern, and I can tell you those 47 miles, to put in new water lines is about $1 million a mile. And the issue is that 95% of those do not have sewer lines currently. So it's all septic based, and we do have an issue in the village with older septic systems and leakage, and concerns about it, making it into the water table and so on. So it would be a great thing if we could expand our wastewater capacity out to those same 47 miles, but wastewater facilities are another $1 million a mile. So if we were to replace all 47 miles, and keep in mind, we have about 140 miles of water lines. So we're just talking about 47 out of 140. To replace the water lines, and while we're there, put sewer lines in, would be $100 million.
Thank you.
So Eric, I didn't know if you wanted to proceed. It doesn't look like there's any other questions right now.
Okay, terrific. I will go ahead. So what we did do is that we did put together a time schedule, should the village, want to issue, the bonds that voters authorized in 2023, you could this year issue all, 1.8 million. So voters authorized 900,000 for roads and another 900,000 for wastewater improvements. And so that's what the proceeds of those bonds would be restricted for. And so, if it was the village council's pleasure, we would come back, later this month at your January 28th meeting. We would have you introduce an ordinance. We would submit an application to the New Mexico Finance Authority. And then the village would approve the sale of the bonds in February. And then we would close sometime in the April timeframe. Again, this would be just for the bonds that the voters authorized in 2023. You technically have until November of 2027 to issue those bonds before that authorization expires. So the village has that option, and if that is the pleasure, then we can certainly be prepared to have a bond ordinance available for the village to approve. We set this time schedule so that funds would be available when the ground would start to thaw out and provide funds so that the village could get going on its project. But again, this is not something that you have to do this year. You can wait and decide to do it next year or in 2027, should you so choose. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we did provide a little bit of additional information. We did provide some information on your gross receipts taxes. So currently, cities and villages have the ability to impose up to 2.5% of gross receipts taxes through municipal GRT for general purposes. 2.05% of that can be imposed through council action only. The remaining 0.45% has to be imposed once voters approve the imposition of additional gross receipts tax. Currently, the village has imposed all of its increments of gross receipts tax that does not require an election, but the village does have about 0.4375% of additional increments that would have to be approved by voters prior to imposition. And we estimate, based upon the village's 2024 gross receipts tax collections, that it would generate about $786,000 in revenue. We've provided several years of history of gross receipts tax collections. Currently, year to date, the village is running a little bit lower than it was last year, about 4%. And in 2024, the village was up almost 3% year over year from 23. And then in 23 saw fairly healthy growth of about almost 9%. We also have information for 22 and 21 where we saw fairly significant growth in gross receipts tax revenues. In the back of the presentation, we've also provided outstanding debt that the village has that is non-general obligation bond related. I won't go through it unless you'd like for me to. I will just note that one loan that we don't have in here is a recent clean water drinking loan that the village recently entered into with the New Mexico Department, the New Mexico Environment Department. And with that, I'd be happy to, answer any additional questions that you all have, and we can go from there.
So, since this was just a presentation, not an agenda item, I can't ask the council, for any, decision. But I will be asking you to get with me over the next couple of weeks and, give me, your idea of which direction you'd like us to go in and, what we should present, potentially at the next, council meeting, depending upon how we wanna move forward, so that we can start the process. If we're gonna do this, we need to get it started now.
Understood.
Should we have a work session on it?
We can.
Or we can just collaborate and discuss?
Okay.
Okay, Eric, I'll be back, get in touch with you and let you know what we do to move forward in time for you to prepare for the next meeting.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. I don't believe we had any requests from the audience to speak this evening. So we'll move on to announcements and proclamations by council. I'll just let everyone know that myself, Chief Hogrefe, and Manager Weir attended a public forum in Raton last night, put on by the governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, and it was actually quite informative. Our chief had some discussion points. The discussion mainly revolved around public safety, but went in a lot of different directions. He mentioned to the governor some of the legislation that's being proposed that he supported, and Manager Weir was able to present her with one of our cute little orange Visit Angel Fire puffy jackets, which she was happy to put on, and got a little time with her as well, discussing some of our infrastructure needs, especially in light of the Pacific Palisades fires that are currently burning, insurance needs and how that all ties together. And she did put him in contact directly with someone to advance that topic. So they did, in the public forum, agreed to do what they could to help our community, so just wanted to leave that out there. Moving on to staff reports. Chief Hogrefe?
Yes, sir.
Mayor, council, manager, and guests tonight. Council, does everyone have one of these in their packet? The report?
No, they don't.
No. You do now. Just pass one down, please. On here is the monthly recaps for November and December of 2024 respectively. As no real surprise, you'll notice that December we were much busier than we were in November, and November was actually up from October and September. Total calls by the Angel Fire Police Department was 232 for December, over twice what November was. Incident reports that were generated were 55. Not surprisingly either, is 11 of those were false alarm calls or alarm calls. When you have an influx of people coming in, they go to their B&Bs, they enter the wrong code, it triggers an alarm, and we typically respond to those as quickly as we can. Warrants generated were 3, arrests were 3, crash reports taken were 6. I would have expected to see probably some more, but we really didn't have too many days with bad roads and driving conditions, so that probably accounts for that. As far as the enforcement side of traffic, we issued 47 moving violations or traffic violations with a total of 66 traffic stops, the remainder of those being warnings, if you will. And for non-traffic citations, there were 14. That's generally a petty shoplifting or something along those lines that get a non-traffic citation rather than a full arrest and a booking into the Raton Hotel. Other stuff, we hired Ruben Lucero. He began, he's our 6th officer. He came to us from Taos County Sheriff's Office. He's a certified police officer, and he was current on all of his training. He's breezed through the orientation and field training that was administered by Officer Alvis May, and he's been on his own since before the Christmas crunch, if you will, or the major holidays. I'm very, very happy that we were able to attract him here. I think he's going to be a long-term fit, and he lives right here in the valley. Our officers all completed our annual training for 2024. For 2025, the new curricula is going to require about 300 total hours of training for our size of a department. So that's considerably more, but we're prepared for it. Our officers also attended an active shooting training with the Colfax County Sheriff's Office and the New Mexico State Police. I didn't get to go, somebody had to stay back and work, but the other officers all went to Raton High School, and then there was one at Clayton High School. And they reported it was very good training. They actually got to shoot simunition rounds at each other and the bad guys, so they came back pretty happy with the training overall. You had approved last month, or in November, the expenditure for Axon upgrade of lapel and dash cameras. We're waiting on that install. I actually got an email today. We should have the lapel cameras by next week and that part installed, the docking station installed, and then the dash cameras probably 2 weeks to follow that. So hopefully by President's Weekend, Valentine's Weekend in February. We're waiting on the final work to be done for the Public Works and Police Department's new digital repeater install. The work that needs to be accomplished for that to go live is at the Red River Dispatch Center. I did talk to Brian with Spectracom today. They are working on it. They have one of the 3 consoles built and installed and are diligently working on the other 2. They'll be back to work on it this week. And then the Durango Police Unit that was the village pool car is now my police unit. It's sitting outside. It's now built and in service, has lights, siren, transport cage, and so forth. And the new Tahoe that we received at the end of last year is at Spectracom up in Alamosa getting upfitted. Should have it within about 3 weeks or so. I stand for any questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Chief Vance?
Mayor Lindsay, members of the council, Manager Weir, thank you for having me here today. We have sent 4 personnel and engine 3573 on deployment to the they've been staged at the Los Padres fire in support of the LA fires. They left Saturday morning. They're on an expected 14-day deployment. They have the option to get extended beyond that if they're deemed necessary. So we wish them the best of luck in their support of the LA fires. We have the 2024 annual slash numbers in. Angel Fire Department / program process over 14,000 cubic yards in pile burns and ACI burns. 10,000 of that was brought in by the public. We also processed over 2,000 cubic yards that were picked up over 94 locations within the village. 5,500 cubic yards of slash was chipped and distributed throughout the village, and just over 420 slash permits were issued last year. About 70% of the old slash pit has been reduced, and we should have that completely reduced by the beginning of spring and the next slash season. I encourage anybody who hasn't driven by there recently to take a drive by that location to see the wonderful work that the Slash crew has done. We are very appreciative of their work. The 2024 NFERS reports are in, meaning in 2024, we ran 512 calls for the fire department in total. The previous year in 2023, we had ran 264, so we're about up 10%. Just 14 days into the year now, we've already ran 38 calls, so we're on pace to kind of smash that. We've ran 25 medical calls and 6 fire calls. What's interesting about that is 6 of those calls have been an Eagle Nest, another 6 to FA1. But 7 of those calls that we've had in the 38 have been simultaneous calls that have come in, so we've had to mix and match our crews to make sure that we have a response. The process for business-related fire inspection has been formalized. Inspections have been handed off to the state. Instructions on how to request a business fire inspection are now on our Facebook, our LinkedIn page, and the fire department website. So if you have a business fire inspection that needs to be conducted, please go to that website and follow the instructions there. All of the information is at your fingertips. We are also very close to passing a defensible space ordinance through committee, and hopefully being able to pass that on to legal review in the upcoming weeks. We are very hopeful to get that passed. That's all I have. I stand for any questions.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to add that the inspection information that is now posted on the website, we will be pulling together a campaign in conjunction with the short-term rental inspection, and to notify the public and educate the public on the availability of those items on our webpage.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Epley, did you have anything for us at this time?
Actually, yes, I do. I wasn't, sorry, good evening, council, mayor, Ms. Strickland, Manager Weir. I wasn't scheduled to do updates. I did last, but there's just been some recent discoveries related to the rather, I'll call it a unique weather pattern we've been in this winter. 2 main things we're seeing is that in areas where spring water exists, we have damming taking place within the bar ditches, and it's building up and overflowing out into the road. It's a very unique situation. I kind of mentioned it in my last update, but it's really been prevalent with this cold spell we've been through. For what it's worth, they're experiencing it on the golf course as well, ice flows that they usually don't see. We're starting to get those addressed as quickly as possible. I would advise everybody to use caution. I went up to mark and cone off 1 and found 3 others on my way up. That's what I'm sorry, I was a little late for the meeting. But also the other thing we're seeing is a pretty significant number of lines, water lines to homes that traditionally have not frozen, that are freezing. And different scenarios, very few of them are at the meter can. We are running into quite a few from in between the meter and the house. Oddly enough, it's on the shady side of the hill where normally places have snow cover, which has good insulating qualities. Definitely more prevalent where water service lines are underneath driveways. Frost penetration in some areas, particularly over the last 2 weeks, has really gotten down. So it obviously is a bigger issue in homes that are periodically occupied. Those that are occupied full time, we haven't had many problems. Water crews are answering many service calls every day, have been able to resolve a lot of the situations, and everybody just kind of needs to be aware. We're going into the time of the year where it's going to stay extremely cold, and there has been a negative effect due to the lack of snow and its insulating properties. So, really all I have.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I believe that does it for our staff reports. Any committee reports this evening? If not, we'll move on to new business. So I would like to start with item A, discussion to approve appointment of Ileana Strickland as village clerk. So, I'll let Manager Weir speak to this, but have promoted Rocky to our project manager position that we recently created at the last council meeting, and the only way we were able to do that is because we had a very competent deputy clerk with Ileana. If you have anything more to add to that, Manager?
Mr. Mayor, Council, yeah, we did have two applications, including Ileana's. Ileana, because of her working as the deputy clerk and having already been through some clerk training, was the more qualified of the applicants. I will say that she's done a great job already. We've started, as you may have noticed, she's been running the last few meetings in training as a deputy clerk. So it was kind of a natural for her to take over. We're very happy with her work. She's someone that you don't have to ask twice to do things, and it's amazing. When we originally hired her, we had a challenge with our filing system, and I envisioned it taking 6 to 9 months to fix it, and I think she fixed it in a month. It was about a month. So I think she's proven herself. She definitely has the knowledge. She's still gonna be new. There's still gonna be some learning curve to have to go through, but she is much further knowledgeable and advanced in being a clerk than any of our last 3 clerks that we appointed. So with that said, we have high expectations of her, and I hope that you will agree and approve her appointment by the mayor.
Any questions or discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Hal?
I make a motion to approve the appointment of Ileana Strickland as village clerk.
Second. Oh, sorry. I'll second.
Roll call vote on item A. Mayor Pro Tem Hal,
Aye.
Councilor Humbert,
Aye.
Councilor Crane,
Aye.
and Councilor Weeks.
Aye.
Thank you. Pass.
Moving on to item D, we'll open discussion to approve request for proposal RFP 2024-012 airport consultant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Manager, and Clerk Strickland. In December 20th, the RFP was due for airport consultant, the RFP 2024-012. One qualified respondent was received. It was Dubois King. The evaluation committee read through the proposal. They recommended to the airport transition committee to proceed with that proposal, Dubois King. So the airport transition committee is making the recommendation to accept Dubois King as the airport consultant. We did inform the evaluation committee that they had several options because they received one respondent. They could accept it, they could deny it, or they could just do nothing. They chose to accept it, and now it's to the council as to whether or not you wish to approve or decline that recommendation for airport consultant. And I'll stand for any questions.
If there's not any further questions or discussion, I would ask Mayor Pro Tem Hal to make a motion.
I make a motion to approve request for proposal RFP 2024-012 airport consultant.
I'll second.
Roll call vote on item B. Mayor Pro Tem Hal,
Aye.
Councilor Humbert,
Aye.
Councilor Crane,
Aye.
and Councilor Weeks.
Aye.
Pass.
So moving on to item C, I'll open discussion to the approve request for proposal RFP 2025-01 on-call engineering services.
Gentlemen, This is on-call airport engineering services. It's permission to submit the RFP out for publication for an on-call airport engineer. And I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
What's that entail?
The on-call airport engineer is responsible and follows FAA regulations for hangar, the infrastructure pertaining to that hangar, development, construction, oversight, plan, design, construct, et cetera, of any improvements, capital improvements to the airport. Right now, the main thing is the hangar that they were discussing.
Trying to get that grant money, help the county get it spent.
And this needs to be separate and apart from our existing on-call engineer because of the nature of the contract for the airport right now?
Our engineer would have to, they would sub that out because that's not in their bailiwick. So we are looking at, specific airport engineering services.
And Mr. Mayor, Council, yeah, I requested this because I want to be prepared. We don't have a project that's ours right now that we would ask this engineer to get involved in, but I'm anticipating, we've already had, since we've taken possession or operational control of the airport, we've already had 2 local plane owners contact the director of operations at the airport about leasing land to build private hangars. So our engineer would have to be involved in that. If we go out for any grants ourselves, non-county grants, we will need our own engineering. And I would just rather have this in place when we need it and not wait until we do need it and then have to go through the process. So this is a specialty for engineers. Our current on-call does not have this specialty, and so I think it's prudent for us to bring in a firm that has these expertise.
No further questions or discussion. I'll ask Mayor Pro Tem Howe to make a motion.
I make a motion to approve the request for proposal RFP 2025-001 on-call engineering services.
I'll second.
Roll call vote on item C. Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
Aye.
Councilor Humbert,
Aye.
Councilor Crane,
Aye.
and Councilor Weeks.
Aye.
Pass.
And moving on to item D, open discussion to approve resolution 2025-01, authorizing the submittal of an application for the 2025-2026 NMDOT Road Fund Program. Before we get too far into discussion, I'm sorry, that's a resolution, never mind. Julie?
Sure. Gentlemen, this is, I'm asking permission through this resolution to apply for funding. This is the co-op fund. This project is for Upper Bill Burgess Road from Vale to the transverse drop inlet there. The plan design is gonna cost in the neighborhood of $95,000. Because this is a co-op, they don't usually give you that much, so I'm asking for $80,000 from the state. Total project cost is a little over $1.1 million. For the total project cost, we can either use GO bond funds or we can use TPF funds that come out in August that I would apply for that kind of funding. And I'll stand for any questions you may have. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. No further questions or discussion. I would ask Mayor Pro Tem Howe to make a motion.
I make a motion to approve resolution 2025-01, authorizing the submittal of an application for the 2025-2026 New Mexico DOT Road Fund Program.
I'll second.
Roll call vote on item D. Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
Aye.
Councilor Humbert,
Aye.
Councilor Crane,
Aye.
and Councilor Weeks.
Aye.
Pass.
Okay, moving on to item E, open discussion to approve annual updated resolution 2025-03, open meetings.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the open meetings It's the annual renewal of regulations that requires government and public bodies to conduct their meetings and decision-making process transparently and openly. I'm asking that you approve that.
Manager Weir.
Mr. Mayor and Council, the one thing I would like to point out in this is that this basically complies with state statute with one exception, in that we give notice 5 days prior to any regular meeting, and statutorily, we're only required to give it 72 hours in advance. So we actually exceed the state statute in this resolution as far as notification to the public.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I make a motion to approve annual updated resolution 2025-03, open meetings.
I'll second.
Roll call vote on item E. Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
Aye.
Councilor Humbert,
Aye.
Councilor Crane,
Aye.
and Councilor Weeks.
Aye.
Pass.
Okay, moving on to item F. I'd like to open discussion to approve annual updated resolution 2025-04 on the Code of Ethics.
Good evening again. This is the annual renewal of the official standards of conduct, outlining principles and honesty and integrity. So just pretty much your annual oath.
Manager Weir, do you have anything to add? Mayor Pro Tem.
I make a motion to approve the annual updated resolution 2025-03, open meetings.
I'll second.
Point of order is Code of Ethics, not open meetings.
Item F. We just passed E, so we're on item F now.
I'm sorry. I make a motion to approve annual updated resolution 2025-04 on Code of Ethics.
I'll second.
Roll call vote on item F. Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
Aye.
Councilor Humbert,
Aye.
Councilor Crane,
Aye.
and Councilor Weeks.
Aye.
Pass.
Okay. Now moving on to item G, open discussion, just a discussion item about Public Works purchase of reserve equipment, TP pumps.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, Clerk Strickland, Manager Weir. Wanted to ask for discussion on this item, partly due to the size of the expenditure of $127,700, but also an explanation of what these components are. A little back history, as we all know, we've had failures of booster pumps up here from time to time. This summer, through the initiative of Evan Archuleta, Logan Fuchs, and Nathan Gopium, they came to the realization that in the past, the practice of just throwing the bad pumps away and putting new ones in, it's not always absolutely necessary. They took the initiative to take these pumps apart, learn about the components, do some research on their own, and discovered that when there is a pump failure on the pump itself that doesn't involve the electric motor, those pump bodies are fixable with the components. The cost of these components are a third of what the replacement pump is. So one, I want to commend them to showing the initiative. It is what saved our bacon. We got in a serious situation with the Tank 4 booster station, which supplies the Aspen's tanks, where we had backup pumps on order. They were still weeks out. That's the incident that they took the initiative. They found old pumps, pulled parts out, got it working, and it's going. So what this allows us to do is, moving forward, is as opposed to just grabbing one of our replacement pumps and throwing it back on, which obviously we would do, We would then be able to repair the pump if it's just the pump mechanism itself. Just another thing that these guys have done, again, in taking the initiative to help better prepare this community for such incidents. Any number of things can cause failures to pumps, leaks, power issues. We've experienced them all. I will say that we have had a significantly lower number of pump failures, definitely without a doubt, since we installed the SCADA system. We've been able to, especially the scenarios where there's a leak and the pump runs dry.
Yeah.
We've been able to head off some of those. So, you know, moving forward, I'm meeting with engineer and suppliers tomorrow to discuss, as I've mentioned before, the scenario of more standardizing our pumps, the use of variable frequency drives. We'll be meeting with them in the morning, and I'm guessing that, you know, this expenditure is in budget. And I'm guessing after the discussion I have with them tomorrow, next council meeting, we're gonna have another discussion about a large expenditure. But I think moving forward, it's gonna really help us in a lot of scenarios. One scenario I had not even considered the benefit of this is, and you know, I know the ability to more quickly recover water up the mountain is a great benefit to keeping people in service. But God forbid we have an incident with fire. Our ability to get more water up the hill. Because at the end of the day, some of our tanks just really aren't that big if we were in that scenario. Okay. And I'm open to any questions.
How many gallons does our largest tank hold?
Our largest tank holds 1 million gallons.
Okay.
And it's the tank that can be seen from Village Hall right on the hill. It replaced tank number 3. But tank number 3 still has capacity, and I believe it's a 150,000 gallon tank.
Thank you.
Tank 7 was just increased from a 100,000 gallon tank to a 300,000 gallon tank. In size and capacity, the next best step from there is the Aspen's tanks. There's 200,000 gallon tanks.
All right, thank you, sir. Moving on to item H. I'd like to open discussion, request to proceed with the night sky ordinance.
Did we vote on it?
Do we need a vote on G or no?
Yeah.
No, just a discussion.
Just a
item.
discussion, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Shelby Kaiser.
Mayor Lindsay, council members, congratulations, Ileana and Manager Weir. Thank you for having us this evening. So I wanted to kind of give a background why are we here. So the existing conditions are that the current ordinance, which is ordinance 9-7-8 exterior lighting, was adopted in 2022 and amended in 2005 and again in 2023. Since 2022, when the current ordinance was adopted, 665 building permits have been issued. Of these, 640 are single-family dwelling units, 7 are commercial sized, and 18 are multifamily buildings. Over 20% of these total 665 permits issued during this time period have occurred in 5 years.
Shelby.
Pardon?
I apologize. I can't imagine that those stats are correct.
I got them from the
Since 2022 or 2002?
2002.
Okay, thank you.
But since,
That makes more
If you-
sense.
If you don't
did
mind.
I say it wrong?
You were saying 2022.
But
So
since,
2002, amended in 2005, then again in 23, is that
Okay.
correct?
okay, since 2002,
Thank you.
665 building permits. But of the 665 in that time period, 20% have been incurred in the past 5 years. Okay? Okay. And then I did get the information from the AFPO.
No, I think that's correct.
Blah, blah,
Again, I
blah.
apologize,
Yeah,
but you were
okay.
saying
Yeah.
2022 instead of 2002.
Right.
That's
okay.
where the numbers weren't adding up.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. Okay, numerous residential and commercial sites in the village create glare, night glow, light trespass, and light clutter. The current ordinance's provisions are subjective and don't contain a provision for any kind of violation or remediation. So the history of our committee: in September of 2023, 2 years ago, an informal citizens group polled the candidates for the mayor and the council positions for this last election and received overwhelming support for initiatives to protect the quality of the night skies in Angel Fire. In April of '24, the Angel Fire Night Skies Committee was formed and appointed to develop a reasonable and enforceable ordinance. Over the next 9 months, the committee then reviewed the ordinances from 8 different comparable sized communities in New Mexico, Texas, and Colorado. Other resources that we used included the New Mexico Night Sky Protection Act, the International Dark Sky Association, and Galen Geisler, who's the representative of the Los Alamos County Commission on Night Skies, and they just recently passed their ordinance. As work progressed, we received input from publicly held committee meetings, a preliminary presentation at an Angel Fire Council meeting, and surveyed local businesses and property management companies. A list of contact information for, at the request of the council, our committee compiled a list of information for contact information for lighting consultant companies, our local electric co-op, and the Los Alamos County officials to assist the village in researching costs and procedures for municipal lighting plans. It was beyond the scope of our committee to make those kind of determinations, but we do have a list, and I do have more, an additional contact information that's not currently, and I can give this to Ileana to distribute. There was another lighting consultant company that I just got their information from Galen Geisler that they also used in Los Alamos. So why do we want to adopt a new ordinance? What do we get out of the deal? We want to have a succinct building codes that all permitting boards and committees can implement in the village and can enforce, and they would be consistent. We want to be responsible to illuminate areas for safety and crime prevention by eliminating glare and directing the light where it's needed instead of lighting the sky and causing light trespass on our neighboring properties. We want to significantly reduce the electricity costs by using fixtures which direct light where and when they're needed. We want to make our community a better place to live, work, and visit. We want to reduce the interference with the behavior of nocturnal animals, migration patterns, and ecosystem balance. We want to be in a position to host astrotourism events and festivals that celebrate and further educate the public in the benefits of our night sky protection. We want to preserve an increasingly rare resource, the night sky, which is our window to the universe. We shouldn't allow that window to become polluted with unnecessary man-made lighting. Everything kind of boils down to 5 principles of outdoor lighting. Is it useful? Is it targeted? Is it low level? Is it controlled? Is it warm colored? So in your packets, I believe there's our proposed ordinance. I do have, like I said, the additional information is now updated, and just kind of as an examples, we have received from, again, other sources, examples of night glare. I didn't print one for everybody, but, and then this is a picture of the comet Tuchelon Atlas in October of 2024. The comet is seen between the trees, and this person had to drive west of Angel Fire to get the view because we can't see comets if we're looking at this.
Do you mind, could I see the photograph?
Yeah, you can have them. And like I said, because it just takes so much ink, I didn't print one for each, but they're just examples. So if I could entertain any questions?
As far as towers go, we have night skiing. So is that affected by
the night skiing is completed by what, 7? Is that
Eight,
correct?
I believe.
8, 7, 8?
5 to 7.
Anyway,
So as long as it's.
in our latest version of the, after we received input from various sources, our latest version of the ordinance kind of had a sweeping change that says any non-complying lights, light fixtures that aren't shielded, aren't downward pointed, must be extinguished by 10. And so the night skiing is definitely done by 10.
Okay.
So that's not a problem. Same thing with,
Flagpoles.
pardon?
Flagpoles would be the same?
Correct.
Okay.
If they're fully shielded downward, where the flagpole, where the flag is illuminated from above and complies, otherwise, timers would affect that. One question at the previous presentation we had was on, holiday lighting. And there again, we've addressed that we tried to make limits on holiday lighting as to how many lumens per acre, how many trees can we wrap, and we thought, because Angel Fire, if our understanding is correct, is trying to promote itself as a holiday destination, well, let's have lots of holiday lights and be very festive, but there again, if they're non-complying lights, and we have, several definitions of complying lights and non-complying lights, then we ask that they just be out by 10.
Have y'all looked at like some of the condominium complexes and determined if there's a percentage of them that are gonna be immediately in non-compliance?
Jake, if you'd help us there, you were working with some of the
So
condo management companies.
We've talked to a couple of the condo management companies and gotten some input there. Some of their concerns match Councilman Humbert's concerns about having, elevated stairways, walkways, those types of things. So one of the revisions in this version versus the last, this does allow for outdoor lighting in spots that are necessary, 24/7. The majority of lights are targeted towards that 10 p.m. cutoff. But stairwells, walkways, those types of things where we're gonna create, hazards by having no lighting. And the ordinance does allow for all method of motion lights. It really is encouraging people to use an adapted, that's the language that you'll see in here, style light, that can come on and be in the location you need it to be on, but not be left on 24/7, 365, that sort of thing. So those were the two big concerns, I think, from the last work session were the Christmas lights, which I'd kind of encouraged to, we don't wanna be out counting lights on trees, that's a bit too far, and then the path lighting and stairway lighting as well. So I guess, this is not so much a question directed at you, but one of the things on here, and I understand is, in my conversation with the manager, we were asking for an impact report, and certainly, this is going to cost money to do, exterior lights on village, buildings. It will require coordination with DOT for street lights up and down 434, Bill Burgess, those types of places. I guess the question is this something, and we have, 4 or 5 committee members here this evening? Is the committee the one that we want to do the impact report? Do we have numbers of lights, types of lights? How do we go about getting you an impact report is the question.
Mr. Mayor, my recommendation is, since this is a relatively new, I want to say a new concept, I know it's not new, but it is something that we want to undertake and do it correctly. My recommendation is that we hire, with your permission, a consultant to come in and do an analysis for us. I think, although the committee, I think, has done a good job, I think that to really understand the impact of this would be an excessive amount of work to request for volunteers. And right now, with everything going on, the village doesn't have the resources or the expertise to perform that type of study. But I do think it's important that the study be done, that we understand not only the impact to the village itself, but also what we would be asking our citizens to comply with. So that is one thing I'd like to understand. And with your vote to proceed today, which is what the item on the agenda is asking you to do, you know, we would do a couple of things. If in your motion, vote to proceed with the study, we would go out, find a vendor. Hopefully it's not gonna be so expensive, we have to go through an RFP process, but if need be, we will. We'll find a vendor to conduct the study. At that point, I'll also submit the ordinance to legal counsel, because it will need to be reviewed by legal counsel. And then, we can come back to council with, feedback on both of those. Generally, we only need one vote to proceed, but since this one, if you choose to do the study, I think it would be prudent to have that study reported to you prior to a final vote to proceed. Because, generally, the vote to proceed would go to legal counsel, and as soon as we get something back from legal counsel, as long as it wasn't a substantial change, we would then go and advertise, the ordinance, so that the next time the council would see it would be to vote to approve or disapprove the ordinance. But I do think that, we need to understand that. I have one other concern, which is enforcement. We're gonna need to, I don't know what that means right now. I don't know if our code enforcement officer is gonna have to learn certain techniques. How is he gonna determine who's in compliance, who's not? I guess one concern I have is that I would hate to see this to become, something where we're pitting community members against each other, because if we don't have a way to enforce it, the only enforcement's gonna be people turning each other in. And, so those are things I think need to be considered.
I had meant to ask Jay previously, how are other ordinances like noise ordinances enforced? Is it someone calls in, like, you know, chainsaws at 6 o'clock in the morning, or there's the fire pit over there with their music at 11 o'clock at night? How does the village currently handle those kinds of complaints?
So generally, a noise complaint like that would be a call to the police department, and they would respond. I don't think we're gonna ask the police department to respond to complaints about lights.
We do have provisions for, someone submitting a time-stamped photo of an egregious property, that, you know, perhaps their lights on day after day, night after night after night, or a non-complying light, and so then is there, I've heard off and on that there is it's not an ordinance officer, it's
There is a code enforcement
enforcement officer. So something along those lines.
Again, I think we would need to, and that would probably be the route to enforce this, would be a code enforcement officer. But currently, that person, I don't know what tools are needed to measure, to determine proper.
And that's part of our resource material, is a couple of municipal consultant companies for your reference, or you can, you know, again, put an RFP out. But also the Los Alamos County, they use a light meter of, I don't know the technical part, but where they can go out and say, okay, yes, this light is not in compliance or not. Other descriptions in our definitions defines shielded light or non-shielded light, or whether the bulb is exposed or not exposed. So there are some more succinct parameters than what's in the current ordinance.
Seems like too, there would need to be a time frame allowance for like bigger.
So they have two, and that was where I was gonna go. They have currently residential, she has in here 2 years to come into compliance, commercial and government 5 years. The one community that I'm involved in that passed this ordinance, and we have a residential property there, it was 5 years for everyone. And the reason being, I think that gives people opportunity, to really, I mean, again, 2 years, I know it sounds like a long time, but it can be rather short, depending on the number of lights. As Councilor Weeks pointed out, could be a little, a pretty big project, but something to plan on within 5 years.
Well, the easy thing, of course, is if you have a non-complying light, one that is glare or sheds, or, you know, glares down, or light trespass to your neighbor, turn it off at 10 and you're in compliance.
Yeah.
Or, you know, timers, motion detectors. So it's not that
Well, it goes on to
every
say
light in the
after
village
two-
that is not
but after
compliant
2
has to
years,
be.
After 2 years, it has to be shut off at 6 o'clock. According to this. If
we have any
if
6
there's
o'clock
non-compliance,
references?
like,
See that?
I don't recall any 6 o'clock references.
um,
If we do, then it may be a typo.
let's see where I saw that. Anyway, I'll figure out what I was looking at earlier, but,
I think again, I don't remember seeing a 6 PM here either. I think everything was built around the 10.
I'm sorry, by
We couldn't-
sundown, it's by sundown.
For,
They have to be turned off, non-conforming lights have to be turned off by
sundown.
sundown after the 2 or 5 year period. So I mean, they're probably not gonna be on, prior to sundown. That language is
can
in there.
do you have a paragraph number that our secretary can refer to?
E, non-conforming existing lighting, item D, non-conforming commercial and government lights still in operation within 5 years of adoption of this section must be extinguished by sundown. The same applies in item B to residential, non-conforming residential lights still in operation with 2 years of adoption of this section must be extinguished by sundown.
We're updating it right now, that was just a
Oh.
mistake in there.
Okay, that was a miss, because when we updated our last one, we did a search for
Okay.
time periods. And since this refers to a word, then yes, we can update that
I
to 10.
appreciate
Yeah,
that.
that was an oversight, thank you.
I think we had, I don't know if Owen would like to make any other comments. I know he and I have had several, the counter case, and we'd like to hear from somebody who manages several of the other properties, if that's okay.
So is this like a public hearing, or is this?
So he had some questions of me, and I think if you're updating any other language in there, just for consideration, if not, that's okay, but
Well, I mean, an open council meeting, we allow
Oh, okay.
comment pertaining to the agenda item from anyone in the audience.
This is the updated contact list.
If you didn't have anything further at this time, Shelley, I didn't mean to run you off.
Okay.
Mr. Curry?
Mayor, council, manager, clerk. I'm all for it. I was one of the people, I guess when it was for the night sky, I thought it was more of a voluntary thing. I didn't know it was gonna be so structured and with penalties and that kind of aspect. But one of the big things is just in the definitions, it's glare. It says includes any interior lighting that creates light trespass or the light source is visible from another property. So basically, if you go out your house and you can see light from another property, it's glare and you're in non-compliance. And when you do the impact study, I mean, people would have to put in, unless they wanna turn everything off at 10, are gonna have to put blackout shades on all their windows, I'm assuming to.
It's the light source, so if you have a bulb,
Well, if you have a TV on, then you can see it from another property, is that accurate, or?
It's when that light sheds onto the other property.
So if you can see somebody else's
No,
TV,
no.
that's not what this language says, it's visible from.
Did you see the definition of light trespass?
Well, it doesn't really matter, that definition for glare says a light source is visible from another property.
Mindy?
I'm sorry, I'm looking for where you're talking
Oh,
about.
just in the definition.
It's glare under definitions. And then light trespass says causing annoyance, loss of privacy, or nuisance. So annoyance is a pretty person-specific.
I don't think, to Owen's point, I don't think we can, I don't think I can support anything that regulates interior lighting. Exterior
One of the
lighting,
examples I had was interior lights trespassing on someone else's property. The chandelier type of lighting.
yeah, I
where it still
understand, but
causes
again,
trespass.
I'm not gonna, I can understand, I even have a hard time with the soffit lights because they're truly a down-facing light, not an upward-facing light. But if you're below that property, I know that you have a particular problem with one particular house that started this years ago, and I appreciate the initiative, I truly do. Because I do wanna protect the night sky, I wanna be able to see things through a telescope, I wanna see the comet without having to drive, for miles, but at the same time, I'll tell you, for me, it's a no-starter to regulate interior lighting. period. I mean, I've lived in a number of houses here, and we don't have shades on any of the windows. And we're usually in bed by 9, but not always. And, I don't wanna be having to litigate having my living room lights on past 10 o'clock. I just don't, for me, again, I wanna keep this, I wanna make it so that we can do something with this. I don't wanna make it where we can't. And for me, that's a no starter personally.
Well, I think our concern is that we have, even since the house, you know, you and I are talking about, other residences where the interior lights shed light on someone else's property.
Yeah, but I mean, we live on quarter-acre lots.
Yeah.
There's 20-acre lots available in the Aspens if you don't wanna be in that neighborhood. I understand, but there's more undeveloped lots here than there are developed. And as you pointed out, we've had 665 building permits, and quite frankly, we need double that over the next 20 years if we're gonna be able to pay for and sustain this infrastructure. We need more people on there. And we can't, in other words, there's gonna be more and more lighting, and I think that's where we need to get ahead of it now with something like this. But again, regulating interior lighting, I think, is a stretch.
And the other concern is that, you know, they were talking about a time frame, but it says in here, if you wanna get a short-term rental permit, you have to submit a compliance plan for your lighting. So there is not any, for the 1,000+ short-term rentals, there's no grace period. It's once you go to do a thing, you have to submit a plan. So those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, Shelley, I'm not picking on it, I just wanna say that I think they're valid concerns.
Well, and we want to be able to have something that, like I said, is reasonable and enforceable. So these were areas, and that's why, you know, we're coming to the council to say, you know, let's try to do this in one sweep and have something reasonable and enforceable. So are you, no.
Come on.
So at this point, what would be the path forward? Should we change certain language and come back to the council, or agree on changes in language at this point in time so that we can move forward?
Quite frankly, I would encourage the committee to come up with an ordinance that is pretty bare bones, that it could be built up over time versus, again, we're not gonna regulate, I mean, we're gonna be, if this meeting goes much longer, we're gonna be out of compliance here.
Right. Okay, I guess I need to understand from you what you mean by bare bones, because bare bones is what exists now, and we I think agreed that what exists now does not give us anything.
Right, well,
Okay.
quite frankly, it's, I guess it has to do with reasonable enforceable. So just based on some of those points that Mr. Curry brought up, and a few others, I would like to, I just wanna be cautious moving forward with this, because again, I don't wanna have something that we can't enforce, or that we're gonna choose not to enforce. Because I'm not gonna have the police chief go ask someone to turn their lights off in their living room, at 10:30 at night.
Okay, so what is your recommendation to the committee, please?
Well, I would start by taking any interior lighting out of the ordinance altogether.
Okay,
As far as I can tell, that only exists in your glare section.
the what section?
The glare definition
Yes, okay.
section. The word interior, I don't think appears anywhere else in there. You know, I know there's a concern about the fining, but I've also, if we're gonna pass an ordinance and it doesn't have any teeth in it down the road, what's the point? So, I don't know that everyone's gonna get everything they want here. I think you're right there on the end. The glare is a concern, and then I would support moving forward with the study. You've already identified the consultant that did this for Los Alamos. My understanding is Taos is considering a stricter version of this than they have currently, and the state's considering it for the upcoming legislative session as well. So even if there are some of us that don't like everything about dark sky, I don't see it going away in New Mexico anytime soon.
And
so.
again, I wanna see something happen, but I don't wanna do it, I mean, I guess we get a lot more complaints for lack of light than we do for light pollution currently. For instance, Director Epler can speak to the number of phone calls we get about the out streetlights, whether they're ours, Kit Carson's, the state. We field those calls all the time. But rarely, and Chief Hogreef might be able to speak more to this, have any for light pollution or light trespass.
Well, I think that's because the current ordinance doesn't allow for any kind of complaint or cooperation between people
Mr. Mayor,
to protect our skies.
I make a motion that we postpone item H to a subsequent meeting.
And I would suggest, if we do structure a work session in the near future to address the bond issue, we could add this, at that time to the work session.
Mr. Mayor, I also would just like to state for the record that, as long as the cost is, under $20,000, you can direct me to initiate a study.
Very good. Understood. Mayor Pro Tem, how would you like to make that motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we postpone, item H, request to proceed with the night skies ordinance.
I'll second.
Roll call vote on item H. Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
Aye.
Counselor Humbert,
Aye.
Counselor Crane,
Abstain.
and Counselor Weeks.
Aye.
Pass.
Thank you. Finally, this evening, item I, I'd like to have a discussion to approve the Angel Fire Department to accept the YCC grant award with match from the village. And she stands.
Mayor Lindsay, members of the council, Manager Weir, and newly appointed Village Clerk Strickland. As a result of the, excuse me, sorry about that. As a result of the former village clerk, Rocky Lira, and Captain Romo with the Angel Fire Department, the hard work they put in, we have been awarded roughly a $280,000 grant. We are requesting approval for funding support for the recently awarded New Mexico Youth Conservation Corps YCC grant. This is previously done before. We initiated the YCC grant, and it was a successful program. This grant allocates state funding to hire youth aged between 14 and 25 years old, although we've restricted it from 18 to 25 years old for our process, for community and conservation projects to provide them with 26 weeks of on-the-job training and education under the AFFD supervision. The YCC work plans, the fire department orientation, education, fire and prevention, presentations at school and local events, home wildfire assessments, defensive driving, preventative maintenance, physical conditioning, aiding with all aspects of the SLASH programs and day-to-day operation, excuse me. Training basics, we offer CPR, first aid, hazardous materials orientation, national incident management systems, basic wildland training and certification, and introduction to structure firefighting, hazardous operations, incident command system, ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800 if you care to know the nomenclature, as well as defensive driving, CEVO, and heavy equipment operations. Benefits to the community of Angel Fire is we have utilized this grant program before, resulting in full-time hires within the village of Angel Fire, and also with the state, local, and federal cooperators. It gives local youths good exposure to community and the fire department, and it allows us to have 5 to 10 additional firefighters in the event of an emergency incident, including wildfires, and adding to our protection. The funding grant match, financial impact to the village. The total grant amount was for $280,492.03. The YCC grant will cover $189,571.57 for YCC member wages and $8,700 for operational supplies for the projects. Our in-kind match will be 41% of that, which is $82,220.46, which includes our contributions of supplies, personal protective equipment, uniforms and recruitment, and our in-kind match will also cover the current AFFD staff that will aid with this program. AFFD staff will provide membership, supervision, and training for all YCC members. The other portion of our match will be administrative time for recruitment, timekeeping, documentation for audits, and all billing related matters. Some of the people that we currently employ have already started to contribute towards this grant portion that would be considered. We're about halfway through the year and we have several employees that fit that 18 to 25 range, and the salaries that we have paid those employees will count towards that grant match. So all in all, we are about a financial impact to the village of about $45,500 we will need for our match, which will take care of operating costs, firefighting equipment, personal protective equipment, and the remaining costs will be current staff, I already said that. Current staff wages have already been budgeted, do you have any questions?
If there's not any further discussion or questions, Mayor Pro Tem Howe?
I make a motion to approve the AFFD to accept a YCC grant award with a match from the village.
I'll second.
Roll call vote on item I. Mayor Pro Tem Howe?
Aye.
Counselor Humbert?
Aye.
Counselor Crane?
Aye.
And Counselor Weeks?
Aye.
Pass.
With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Recording stopped.